Hi everyone, welcome back. This week in Level E, we're going to be going over lessons 49 through 52. And you'll need worksheets 31 and 32, the fraction chart, the math card games book, and the fraction cards deck. All right, let's go ahead and get started with lesson 49. We will be working on whole numbers and fractions. And after the 4 warm-up questions on worksheet 31, we'll start right in with the first problem. Notice that we're only doing one problem today. If you're like me, you will probably just keep going on to lesson 50 in the same day. Otherwise, go ahead and just do this lesson 49 in one day and 50 in the next. It doesn't really matter. The point of the short lessons is to really dive deep into fractions and also to give you more time to play games. All right, problem 1 is asking your child to find the perimeter of 2 rectangles and find out which perimeter is greater. Notice the explanations. Let your child figure out the solution. Any way that makes sense to them is fine. Don't try to teach an algorithm at this point, but referring to the fraction chart to help them out is perfectly fine as well. The terms proper and improper will be discussed in another lesson, so we don't need to introduce those. Make sure to play the game 1 or 2, which is F18 in the math card games book, but there's also a blog about it on the Right Start website, so I'll link to that below. Then you can ask your in-conclusion questions and you're done for lesson 49. Moving on to lesson 50. We will become more familiar with fraction sizes and with adding and subtracting fractions that total 1/2. The warm-ups are oral questions this time, and after that, your child can move on to worksheet problem number 2. Have your child solve the problem and then explain how they got the answer. If you need to write out the explanation, if you need to be the scribe, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that your child is the one who can explain how the solution works. This time you're going to play the game 1/2, which is F8 in the math card games book. And we also have a blog about that one. So on the blog, Debbie makes a really great suggestion for the game. If your child is very visual or has learning differences, they can use fraction pieces to mimic the cards that are being played. That way they can see how the cards compare to 1/2. Let me go ahead and give you an example.
Okay, so let's say that we already have a game in progress. So remember, this is 1/2. And somebody has laid out the card 1/8 and 1/4. Okay, and we're trying to get to 1/2. Well, if I'm more of a visual person or if I have learning difficulties, it is very helpful to go ahead and lay out my puzzle pieces. So of course, your fraction chart is probably the one that's a placard fraction chart. This wooden fraction puzzle is available from Right Start, but it's not necessary. It just happens to be the one I have. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out the equivalent puzzle pieces that correspond to these cards so that I can figure out how much more do I need. Well, honestly, that looks like 1/8. Let's just see if it is. And sure enough, it is. So now I know that I can play my 1/8 card and collect all those cards. I just won that hand. Okay, once again, the game is already in progress and we have the 3/4 card down. Then somebody subtracted 3/8. So let's go ahead and put out the 3/4 puzzle pieces. Oh yeah, sure enough, that is more than 1/2. So then I'm going to have to subtract 3/8 from that. So this would be equivalent to 2/8. So I'm going to take that away. And then this would also be 2/8, but I only wanted to subtract 3/8. So I have to put a 1/8 in there. So that's where we're at right now. So 3/4 minus 3/8 gives me 3/8, okay? Or 1/4 plus 1/8. Then the next card played is 1/4. So I can go ahead and put a 1/4 puzzle piece back in. So we're over 1/2. By how much? It looks like it's 1/8, right? So let's just check. Sure enough, it is 1/8. So then I can play this card over here. Let me scooch this over. I'm subtracting 1/8. That gives me 1/2. So I just won those cards again.
So as you can see, using the fraction charts puzzle pieces to mimic the cards that are being played really helps the child who needs that extra visual boost. All right, so either before or after this game, you can ask the in conclusion questions. Moving on to lesson 51. We will be comparing fractions in this lesson. Once again, we'll be using just one worksheet for 2 lessons. The warm-ups are 4 problems on worksheet 32. After those warm-ups, have your child read and solve the first problem. Remember that your child needs to solve this problem in any way that makes sense to him or her, not by following an algorithm. Play the fraction piece game, which is a variation of fraction war, F7, in the Math Card Games book. In this game, the winner is the player with the lowest fraction. And if this is too simple of a game, go ahead and have the players turn over 2 cards, or maybe even 3 cards, and add them together. So there's always a way to make the game a little bit harder or a little bit easier. All right, in lesson 52, we will be comparing harder fractions. The warm-ups are oral questions, and when those are complete, go ahead and move on to problem number 2 on worksheet 32. Remember that your child can use the fraction chart to help solve the problem, and that the solution needs to make sense to your child. If your child has difficulty with any of these problems, ask questions that lead to discovery, such as, what would the perimeter be if there were no fractions? Just eliminate the fractions for a second and see, what would the perimeter be? And then, what would the perimeter be if you eliminated all the whole numbers and you just added up the fractions? You can also ask your child to refer to the fraction chart. That could be helpful in solving these problems as well. Then you can play the harder fraction war game, which is F9 in the Math Card Games book, and make sure to use the fraction chart for help, because this game is using all of the fractions. They don't have common denominators and they're not equivalent fractions. So the fraction chart can be very helpful in this case. Go ahead and ask your in conclusion questions as a follow-up to the game. And then that's it for this week. If you did do 2 lessons per day, you have extra days to play games and to solidify understanding. Even if it's not about fractions, it could be something that you know that they need to work on. You can go back and play games having to do with that. All right, see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.